Assalamu alaikum everyone, and today I will be giving you 5 predictions for the digital SAT June. All of you who are going for the June test, the test is right on its way, right? And in this video we will be discussing 5 types of questions that I can almost guarantee you that you'll see on your test, right? So let's start with the first one. The first question, or my first prediction for you today, is the words in context question, right? So guys, it is a must that you will see a words in context question in your paper, and in large quantity. I can tell you, I can assure you that you'll have around 7 to 8 questions from words in context, right? Now what is words in context, guys? You will have a passage, and in that passage you'll have a blank, and you'll have 4 options in which you'll be asked to select the best option or the best word that fits in the context of the passage, right? So that is how it goes about, right? Now I'll be discussing this question with you. I'll be sharing some tips on how you can solve it. So the best way to go about it is that you first read the passage, right? And after reading the passage, you understand the type of the word that you need in that passage, right? Once you understand that, you can go on to the options, and you can see which is the word that is nearest to the word that you thought should be a part of that passage, right? That is the best way to go about it. If we read this question, it says, artist Marilyn Dingle's intricate coiled baskets are blank. So we have a blank over here. We don't know the type of the word that should come over here, but the rest of the passage we have to read that and try to figure out the type of the word that should come over here, right? So it says, grass and palmetto palm. Following a gula technique that originated in West Africa, Dingle skillfully winds a thin palm frond around the bunch of sweet grass with the help of sewing bone to create the basket's signature look that no factory can reproduce, right? So we are talking about something that no factory can reproduce. So that means that what he's creating is original, and what he's making them by himself, right? That is how it is going about, right? So we have to find a word that means that, right? So if you look at the first word, first blank, it says indicated by. So if I say coiled baskets are indicated by sweet grass, right? Now indicated is not telling us that he's making them himself, right? So we cannot take A as the answer. If we go for option B, it says handmade, right? So coiled baskets are handmade from sweet grass and palmetto palm, right? Now this very well can be the answer, because it is telling us that they are not made by the factory, right? So we'll take it as our answer, but again we'll look at the other options as well. Represented by, again, is not telling you that they're handmade, and collected with is not telling you it's handmade. So you'll go for option B as your answer, and remember, this is the best way to go about it, right? So guys, this was my first prediction, and you'll definitely have this word or this type of question, words in context, on your exam, right? So let's move on. My second prediction for you guys is the cross-text connection question, right? Now, the cross-text connection question is the only question on the digital SAT in which you'll have a couple of passages, right? Or you'll have more than one passage for one question, right? Every question that you talk about, you'll have one passage for one question, right? And you'd have to, read that passage in order to solve that question. But over here in cross-text connections, as the name suggests, that you'll have multiple text or two texts, and you'd have to see what is the relationship between those two texts and answer as per the question, right? So let's try to solve this question. The first text over here says that public policy researcher Anthony Fowler studied the history of elections in Australia, a country that requires citizens to vote. Fowler argues that requiring citizens to vote leads to a significant increase in voters who would otherwise not have the time or motivation to vote. Thus, election results in countries that require citizens to vote better reflect the preferences of the country as a whole. So the first text is telling us if the people are required to vote, right, the turnout would be better, the results would be better, and overall it would be a good strategy, right? If you read text 2, it says governments in democratic countries function better when more people vote. However, forcing people to vote may have negative consequences. Shane P. Singh and Jason Roy studied what happens when a country requires its citizens to vote. They found that when people are forced to vote, they tend to spend less time looking for information about their choices when voting. As a result, votes from these voters may not reflect their actual preferences, right? Now, the word negative, as soon as you see this word negative consequences, you'll understand that the second text is not in line with the first text, right? The first text is telling you that when you require people to vote, or when you force people to vote, the results are good, right? The text 2 is saying that when you force people to vote, the consequences are negative, right? Now let's look at the question. The question says, based on the text, how would Singh and Roy in text 2 most likely respond to the research discussed in text 1? So obviously they won't agree to it because they feel that requiring the people to vote will have negative consequences, right? So let's look at the options. The first option tells us only countries of a certain population size should implement mandatory voting. So in text 2, we never found anywhere written that a certain size of population will not have those negative consequences. It has what we have in text 2, it is a complete statement about every size of population and that they will have negative consequences if they are required to vote, right? So obviously option A cannot be the answer. If you look at option B, it says people who are forced to vote are likely to become politically engaged in other ways such as volunteering or running for office, right? So again, if you look at option B, it has nothing to do with the text or the opinion that he would create, right? He has to go against the opinion, that the fact that people should not be required to vote, right? Again, this won't be the answer. If you look at option C, it says requiring people to vote does not necessarily lead to election outcomes better represent the preferences of the country as a whole. This is what they would feel, right? Because they feel the text 2, the people who have written text 2 feel that people who are required to vote, they do not look for the information for the voters, for the people who are running for the office and everything. So that is why it has negative consequences, right? So C over here will be the best answer. And countries that require voting must also make the process of voting easier. Now we have not talked about the process of voting in both the text, so this will be completely irrelevant. So the best answer would be option C. And you have to remember that in the cross text connection questions, guys, you will have questions where you will have two passages. So read the two passages first, look at what the question is asking. It's not always the same what the question asks you, and do as per the question, right? So this is how you have to go. This was my second prediction. Now let's move on to the third one. Guys, this is the third prediction, and the third prediction is the main idea question, right? And you can expect main idea questions in both the modules, and you'll have maybe a couple of main idea questions in both the modules. Now what is so special about this question? This question will ask you the primary purpose of the passage, and you have to find an option over here that discusses or has some idea about the entire passage. Now why students normally fail to answer this question? Because you'll have options in which you'll have information that is there in the passage, but what you have to remember is that everything that is mentioned in the passage or everything that is there in the passage will not be the primary purpose or the central idea of the passage, right? So that is what you have to remember, right? The main idea will only be the option that discusses or that has the conclusion of the passage, right, around which everything revolves. So after understanding this, we'll read the passage. It says, the following text is adapted from Johanna Cyprie's 1881 novel Heidi, translated by Elizabeth Stock in 1915. 8-year-old Heidi and her friend's grandmother are looking at some illustrated books. Heidi had come and was looking with wondering eyes at splendid pictures in the large books, right? So she was very inspired and she was very motivated to look at them. The grandmama was showing her. Suddenly she screamed aloud, for there on the picture she saw a peaceful flock grazing on green pasture. In the middle a shepherd was standing, leaning on his crook. The setting sun was shedding a golden light over everything. With glowing eyes, Heidi devoured the scene, right? So what they're saying is that she was really interested in what the grandmother was showing her, and she was devouring on the scene. That means she was very inspired by the scene and she was looking at that scene with all of that inspiration, right? So if you move ahead, you have to find an option that talks about the conclusion of the passage, right? And that is that she was really inspired by looking at the picture. If you look at option A, it says Heidi is upset. Now I would stop over here. I would not read the rest of the option, because nowhere in the passage have I found the fact that Heidi was upset because of anything, right? So there and then I would eliminate this option. If you look at option B, it says Heidi is delighted and fascinated by an image she sees in one of grandmama's books, right? So this can really well be the answer, because she definitely is delighted and fascinated by the image that she sees, right? If you look at option C, Heidi is initially frightened. Now this is a trap option. Why? Because there is a part in the passage that says that she screamed aloud, right? but screaming aloud, we have to find out the reason of what was, the reason of screaming aloud. So if you read the sentence that follows, it says, for there on the picture she saw a peaceful flock grazing. So obviously if you are screaming aloud after looking at a peaceful flock that was grazing, it means that you were really inspired by it, or you really liked it. It was not because you were frightened, because you cannot be frightened by it. So that is something that you have to work out. So again, C won't be the answer. And if you look at option D, it says Heidi is inspecting an image, right? So she was not inspecting, she was really inspired for that, right? So again, the best answer would be B. And again, like I told you, you have to find out an option that, the entire passage is based upon, right? And this is the conclusion of the entire passage, that, she was really inspired by looking at the picture. So this was my third prediction, and you have to really work on these questions, and you'll definitely see the main idea questions on the exam, right? So moving on. So guys, my fourth prediction is the boundaries question, right, that pertains to joining two independent clauses, right? It's there in the standard English conventions, and you'll have a lot of questions from this, and I predict that you'll see a lot of questions from this type, and you really have to work hard on this. Now, what is the concept? That when you are joining two independent clauses, there are 5 ways that you can do it, right? Now, what is the first one? The first one is that you can do it using a period or a full stop. You can do it using a comma and a connective, right? Connective can be and, but, right, for, or all of these can be connective. We use fanboys for it as well, right? Every coordinating conjunction, right? The third can be only a semicolon. The fourth can be a semicolon, conjunction and a comma, and the fifth can be a colon if the second sentence is the reason of the first sentence. So these are the 5 things that you can use to join them. Now over here, if you read it, human-made synthetic fibers used in clothes and many other consumer products are more durable than most natural plant fibers. The manufacture of synthetic fibers require toxic chemical solvents that can pollute air and water. So this sentence is independent, and the second sentence is also independent, and you have to find any one of these if you want to join 2 such sentences, right? So over here you have only a comma, so this will be a comma splice error. Over here you only have a connective and no comma, you will have a run-on fragment problem, right? And over here you have nothing, not a connective, not a comma, so this will be a run-on as well. It's only option D where you'll find a comma and a connective. That is why it will be your answer, right? So remembering this will get you through a lot of questions, because you will have these questions that pertain to joining two or more maybe independent sentences, right? And you have to know what is the priority, what is the way to join them. So this was my 4th prediction, guys. Work hard on these questions, because you'll definitely see these questions on your exam in the coming SAT June, right? Now let's move on to the final prediction, guys. This is my final prediction. This is my 5th prediction, and you will definitely see these questions on the SAT June that is upcoming, and it is related to the possessives, right? So we have to be very sure how possessives works in nouns and how they work in pronouns, right? So when you talk about nouns, right, this apostrophe s or only apostrophe shows that it is a possession with someone, right? So if I write, for example, Alan's car, right, so this apostrophe over here is showing Alan's possession over the car, right? That is how it works, right? But because I have a complete category of possessive pronouns when I talk about the pronouns, right, if I want to write the same thing in pronoun terms, I'll be writing his car. So what that means is, if I want to show possession in pronouns, I do not need an apostrophe over here or a apostrophe s over there. Why? Because I have possessive pronouns for that, right? So similarly over here, if you look at the question, mathematician and meteorologist Edward Lorenz used the metaphor of the butterfly effect to explain how seemingly minor events can have major impact on future weather. According to Lorenz's metaphor, the wind from butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil might eventually grow on a storm elsewhere across the globe, right? So you have to see right after the blank you have in, which is a preposition, right? So guys, whenever you have an apostrophe, you need something, or you need a noun right after it, right? You cannot show possession with something that is not a noun, right? So when you know that, you will know that you cannot have an apostrophe after the wings, right? Because if you write an apostrophe after wings, you will be needing a noun after it, which you don't have, right? So you will be eliminating all the options that have apostrophe after the wings, which is technically option B, C and D. and option A will be your answer. And like I told you, you have a possession of its with the wings, and because it is a pronoun, you don't need an apostrophe s with it, right? So that is how you go with the possessive questions, right? And option A over here will be your answer. So that was my fifth prediction, right? And you will definitely see these questions on your exams, so work hard for it, right? So guys, these were my 5 predictions for the digital SAT June. I hope you guys are practicing really hard, and for everyone who is looking for that 1500, 1550 or that perfect score, I want you guys to prepare really well on for the test and get those perfect scores so that you can go for your university. These were my 5 predictions. I hope it will help you. Thank you so much.